So in the last session we talked about why we supposed to use a playwright, how it gives us an advantage, how it is different from Selenium, Cypress. We briefly talked about the CDP protocol that playwright uses and how it is faster and why it is faster than a WebDriver. Then we talked about Node.js ecosystem and compared with Selenium with the Java and how does it is different traditionally with Java ecosystem, and then how we need multiple libraries and not just Selenium, and Selenium not being automation tool but just browser automation tool, and whereas Playwright provides us most of the things that we need when we create a framework, be it like test engine, then reporting, logging, and dependency management. So we talked about that, and then we talked about this important thing that I wanted you to understand. You might be using this, but we're not aware this AA pattern. We discussed this in the brief: arrange, act, and assert, how it works. Then we actually did one test last time. If you recall, we did this test and we found out how things works. We also took a look at the trace viewer, how it works, and the default HTML report. We have not, we just talk about the configuration file, how it works and all those things, but we have not gone into the detailed configuration, configuring it for our need. We will likely to do when we will start going and talk about the framework kind of a thing. In that in those cases we will go in detail about this playwright config ts file, because it plays very significant role. Right. So if you have installed this playwright and node.js on your machine, you would be able to see very similar thing that I wanted to show. But what we will do, we will talk about what is already given as an example, but we will try to create something our very own, so that way we will have the confidence that we created, we learned by ourselves, not just reading the some code which was already out there, right? So any one of you faced any particular issues when trying things out on their end in the last few days after we talked? It's okay if you have not tried anything, but just let me know as a feedback so that we can talk about it. Okay, cool. Thank you. So we will talk about Codegen first. So what is Codegen and why it is important? I tried earlier opening Codegen to see, I recall the right command, because it's not like every day you would use Codegen. Most of the things that you would do in Codegen is also available with Playwright extension in VS Code. Not everything, but yes, most of the thing. So we talked about why it is important to have that in Playwright extension as well, so that we get feature like running the test out from the IDE without using command line tool. And there are a lot of things apart from that, like choosing particular test that you wanted to execute. If there are multiple tests, then you can select projects that you have mentioned in the playwright configuration chromium. You can choose which project you want to work. You can choose whether you wanted to run the test in the browser or directly in a trace viewer. You have a pick locator, so if browser is open, you can pick the locator using the extension. You can record new, record at cursor. So this is something that is related to the Codegen, but yes, we will see that in the action with like separate instance of a Codegen and how it works, right? So the command for that is like npx playwright Codegen. So if you do that, it will just open Codegen along with one browser window. So I have multiple displays, but I'll just show what pops up. So if you hit that command, you will be able to see what you right now see on my screen. I hope it is visible and displayed properly. I'll just change the mode so that it's more visible. Now whatever I tried, it will get recorded and I'll get the script out of the box that I need, right? So in the last example we tried this, so we will try with the same example here as well. So recording mode is on. You can always pause, you can always start from here. This is again like locator selector, this is like asset visibility, and then there are other things that even I have not tried out, but like basic things we will talk. So our recording is on, so we hit the recording and you see that the first thing that we tried, it's already got here that okay, await, you are navigating to the page. As we talked about auto waiting in playwright excuse me, automating in a playwright, you could see that it waits automatically. You don't have to add any weight deliberately or handle the weight, so it just take care of it. Today we will talk about what is this await, what is this important expect once we're done with the Codegen demo. That way you will feel more at home once you try these things at your end. Okay, so we are at the Codegen. Then we talked about like Codegen is there, but now you have to enter something here. So you will click here. Obviously they have given the username above, then student, then password. You will type password and 123, and obviously you want to click on a submit button. So these are the steps that you will have, and as you can see, all these steps are recorded over here out of the box. So same thing, that now login successful, we can just assert, we need to assert the message. So we can check this is asserting. So if you see, it already added an expect, which is like a kind of an assertion that we use in the, okay, I don't know how to zoom this, but I'll just increase the size of this. So now I think it should be visible. So if you see, it has added like an expert kind of a thing, where you will see it will check whether this heading login successful is visible. If it is not, then it will give an error. I'll just copy this code. Obviously there is a function to copy over here, and I'll just now took it to the what we have tried earlier as well, right? Positive test case. So I'll just write like this as a second test case, and I'll just delete this, or I don't have to. I'll just write recorded by Codegen, and you will see now that now that extension is visible, this name of the test is getting displayed over here, right? And I can debug, I can start from here, I can run from here. Here also I get the same option, run test debug. But let's run this and see what happens. Okay, and you see this test is passed. Obviously we talked about result last time, so I'll just open the new terminal and try to see result as well. Playwright show report, and we should record it by Codegen. It took like 5.3 seconds, and out of that 2.2 seconds is for just waiting the page to get loaded, and you see that you are verifying this particular thing. Right now we have recorded it. If you wanted to make a change, obviously it's in code, we can write whatever we want and make the changes once it is recorded. And if you rerun it again, you will see that the assertion is failed, and obviously same thing will reflect into the HTML report as well, right? Now the default timeout is 5 seconds, so it's waiting for 5 seconds to be failed. And if I refresh this, I should see that okay, this element is not visible because we are trying to find this element with the logged in successful one. However, the name is logged in successfully, so it is not visible. And then you see that expectation is failed and your test is also failed, right? And we also talked about the timeout yesterday, how we can configure that. We're not going to talk about that, why it is waited for 5000 milliseconds or 5 seconds, and how can we get rid of that. So that's about it. There is one point that we will talk maybe in the next session, like using the testing library and the locator strategy that Playwright or JavaScript ecosystem tools prefers, instead of using XPath and ID and class and tags. So that is would be helpful in some extent, because the recording and the default or like go-to things are for a Playwright are using those locator. But being said that, it doesn't mean that other locator doesn't work. Those are also work already, but these are the locators they prefer. There are multiple reasons for it, but as I said, we will cover them separately, not in the same session. So this is how Codegen works. So this is what Codegen looks like. It has code copy and other things available. You can always go ahead and record it from here. You can stop recording, and I hope there would be there are different library support as well. So if you write a JUnit code, you will see the JUnit code, which you can use with the Java and other things, just like Selenium ID recorder that used to export the code in different languages. And this is how it would look like in a JUnit. Now if you see, earlier thing was not a JUnit and test runner. So this test runner is by default provided by us, this test. So something that we will talk about by Playwright in a TypeScript ecosystem. So we are not relying on a test engine as such, for test runner as such in our need, right? So when we discuss this ecosystem, we talked about in Selenium we would need testng or JUnit if you are using Java, maybe any unit using a C sharp, PyTest, no, if you are using Python, those kind of a test to run test runner, and then there would be another thing. But that the main reason that one should go for a TypeScript, you get everything bundled one. You are not learning like 10 different libraries. You are not keeping track of their versions and all those things. Everything is like bundled in together and works very nicely, right? So yeah, so we were talking about the code gen, and where is the code gen gone? Yeah. Mhm. Hmm. So you can see these many different libraries it has support for. The JUnit, Python, PyTest code would look like this. I don't know. I have never used Python to that extent, but yeah. So any questions in the code gen before we move to the basics of like how TypeScripts and other things work and those things? Should I take side? Okay, cool. Yeah, Madhukar, Ritvik, if you have any feedback at any point in time, any questions, even if you know, yes, you can call that out so that I'll get to know, where UP stands. Okay, so we covered the code gen part today. We talked briefly about like small things like recording interaction, then viewing the generated code, modifying the recorded interaction. So we covered that, right? So we modified the code, recorded the code. We talked about selectors and all those things. So selectors can be also copied. Obviously, all you get all the extent of a code. So it's you are just doing the copying things. So this is selector for TypeScript, right? Sorry, Playwright. So yeah, that's pretty much the code gen. Then we will talk about TypeScript fundamental, like very bare minimum, like 5-10 minutes before we actually talk about writing our first test using a page object model, and then we will briefly talk about page object model as well, because even it is like very popular um, design pattern. Many people not thoroughly able to put the point what is the design pattern and how page object is different than other design pattern and what problem it solves, right? So we will talk like very briefly about that, and then we will actually write the script that I expect you to write as well and follow along, so that you will get the confidence that you are learning something. I my humble request, you try these things out on your end. Just watching the videos, you're not gonna learn it, right? It's like you're never gonna cook good food by just looking at the YouTube videos. You need to start turning on the gas and trying out recipes. You won't be able to become a good cook. I'm not talking about even chef, but good cook, by just watching the videos. You have to try it out just like that. If you wanted to get good with any programming languages, any tools, any libraries, not talking about just Playwright, but you would have to try that out. Okay, so what is the problem that TypeScript solves? We will talk about TypeScript. So in the last programming we talked briefly about compiled languages and then the languages that are interpreted. So JavaScripting was interpreted language, and with interpreted language there is an inherent flaw as such that you will only get error when we try to execute it, right? So the errors are mostly runtime error in the JS, right? And you won't be able to see those error in your IDE. You are not able to figure it out what is going on unless you execute the code, and it won't like good thing like for small thing to figure it out, to execute the code, and then only you will be able to figure it out. But if something is not the right, for statics languages, IDE provide like great support, and you would be able to know beforehand, okay, this is something that I miss, I should have took care of it earlier as well, right? So runtime error in JS is like a big issue, and that mostly happens because in JavaScript there are no types. So everything is in JavaScript object, right? So even function is an first class object in a JavaScript. So this is like very confusing for me, was at least confusing for me when I started exploring TypeScript and JavaScript ecosystem, that you can pass function as a parameter to another function, and that we never tried that out, that how can we pass a function as a parameter. So you write one function like function 1, and you write function 2, and in function 2 your first parameter can be in function 1. So, and because we came from a Java world, as many of you are, it was very hard to understand that, okay, what is this going on and how does it work. And then there are things called callback, then there is thing called callback hell, and then things evolve. Now they are using promise and promises, and you will see like most of the code that we even have, like have this await and async, and we will talk about what this means, right? So the basic is like JavaScript has runtime error in JS, TypeScript provide statically typed kind of a system, so those kind of an error can be taken care of. But basically TypeScript internally convert this code into the JavaScript, especially when you create a front end code, and then it will execute the JavaScript code. So you tend to make less number of mistakes because type related mistakes are already taken care by TypeScript. Okay, so any questions, any doubt about this? Okay, assuming no. Okay, cool. So what is type, right? So we know the basic types in a Java, and obviously I'm gonna talk from the Java perspective, right? So whenever we, in college, school, classes, wherever we learn the Java, this starts with a type. Like we have integer type, we have float type, we have double type, we have a string type, and those kind of a thing, right? And as I said, JavaScript never had a type. The only way earlier, at least it between before the MCA to 25 JavaScript's version before 25, they only had a var. Like everything in JavaScript could be in var. It could be an object, it could be in string, it could be a number. Everything was on var. And obviously JavaScript has evolved a lot, but then there are still like issues with the JavaScript, and that is why people prefer TypeScript as a programming language for a JavaScript. In a way, TypeScript is a superset of a JavaScript. So most of the code that you write in a JavaScript should work in a TypeScript as it is, but it will enforce you to write a type, because that way you can avoid this runtime error, right? So what are the types in TypeScript? So like bare minimum types, anyone, any guesses about the types that we have? Okay, I'll just type it out: string, then number, and then boolean. These are like, we can consider like basic types in the TypeScript as well, and that's it. Okay, so it's not like much. And then there are complex types that we will talk about as well, but this should be it. It's very similar to what we generally have in Java world as well, right? So let me go to the TypeScript Playground. I was trying something out to show you. Okay, I hope my screen is visible and this is displayed properly. Okay. So as I said, in JavaScript, everything was a var. So you would define var as a variable name, like var1 as a mole. But TypeScript don't. So this would work in the JavaScript if you see. Okay, use strict. This is variable in JS. In DTS, it will declare static variable string. As you see, what it has happened, because you had, it is marked as a string by enclosing it double inverted this double inverted comma, you will see that it has type a string, right? But in TypeScript, if you write just 10, you will see that it is given a type as a number, right? JavaScript, it's still like this. It doesn't matter that it is string, number, or even if you give the boolean value, it's strict. But this, you will see the type has changed, right? So these are like basic things, like very basic things that we will need. Why we need types for everything, but you will have that kind of an understanding having it here. We just tried out variable one, this, right? We tried variable false, we tried with string, we tried with some number, and you can see those things are changing and type in TypeScript. Okay, one thing that I should have told, that all the TypeScript code, as in this, when you start the project, will have .ts extensions. TS stands for TypeScript, very obvious. And for all the playwright script that's supposed to execute, it will end with spec.ts. It's very similar to the what we might have seen in the spec flow as well, that it has particular extension. This is same something we have in the jest as well, right? Just people generally use for a front-end unit testing, especially folks on the React side, and they create this spec.ts files, which is nothing but a test file. So that is how TypeScript IDE understand this is test file and not code file or some other file, not like markdown file. So similarly, you can see this ts files, you will see have like these types that we talked about, and then JavaScript, it has nothing, right? With TypeScript, there is also var is not like they recommend use. They ask you to define something, use as a let, and if something is not gonna change, like suppose planet 3 names is Earth, so which is not gonna change. So in that case, it's expect you to write as a constant, right? And because it's just like variable type, how you declare the variable. So this, so if you now if you type like var1 and you type this like 20, this will result in an error because the type cannot find var. Okay, sorry. This is supposed to give you an error anyway, because in TypeScript the type that you have earlier defined is an number, and now it is what you are trying out is an string, right? For planet 3 you won't be able to add something because it's a constant. You can't change the value of what is assigned to the constant. So if you go over here, you will see message cannot assign to planet 3 because it is a constant, right? So what you just need to know, we need to use let and const. Something that is gonna change, we'll have variable, like in variable we will use let, otherwise we will use const, right? So let's go back to the code that we generated earlier, and what we will see, right? So here we have nothing is like we copied, everything was like await, and that we will see about that. But okay, right, not it's not good time to talk about the script right away. So these are like let and constant type, with the open variable declaration. We talked about different type of these things, right? The ideal way to initialize everything, you need to provide the type. Like if you are providing a type, you will write it like a type string, and then you will actually assign the value, right? So browser, so this is the ideal way, so that TypeScript will able to understand this is of a type string, right? So if you are using some number, why don't you give it as a type numbers? So these are like built-in type, and if you write this will work, right? But if you try to assign this Amol, it will give an error because type is number, and what are you assigning it? Type string is not assignable to type number. So this type enforcement happens by the TypeScripts, and it helps a lot in JavaScript world where there are no types available. Any questions before we move on to the bit of the complex things? Again, this is like very similar to the Java, not like very different, but it just syntax and maybe way we declare things, those are bit changed. It's not like very different, but yeah, that should give you some idea, right? This is how you will go and declare the boolean, right? In TypeScript, it is up to you whether you have to add this semicolon or not, but in JavaScript it is enforced. You're supposed to use to denote that particular semicolon with semicolon, that's something like this. Again, like array is also there if you wanted to define multiple browsers, you could use array. This is how you would define the array. You will see type, and then type, after type you will have this open square braces, and then if you want to declare something, you can just write chrome. Okay, obviously it's a string type, so you would have to write chrome, and then maybe age and this is how we define the array in the TypeScript. Yeah, so this is pretty much it, like not much, but should be good enough. Any questions in the basic type before we actually talk to some important things about the TypeScript? Access specifier, yeah, it is there, and we can use them to our leverage, but access specifiers comes into the picture when we talk about the code. uh, it is when it is talk into the code, when we talk specifically, when we use object oriented languages, right? That you have multiple objects, and in multiple objects you wanted to make sure that a particular attribute is exposed to certain level only, that being it private is only available in the class, being it protected only be available to inherited class, and public would be available to all the classes that it will be talking to. Here most of the time, in TypeScript ecosystem, we don't use things from the object oriented perspective, right? So what I meant by that, it's not entirely correct, but you need to understand that whole thing is trying to address in JavaScript ecosystem, and JavaScript is not object oriented language. It is not meant for object orientation purposes, right? It's functional paradigm, it is functional oriented language. And similarly here as well, right? You don't see public static void main wala thing that will able to understand key, okay, where this script starts from. It starts from whenever you write. You don't have to mention, like, you can add one more functionality, it will work. It don't have like this block where you will understand this is where the flow starts from. So that is how it is taken care of. That's one aspect. The other aspect that we will talk about eventually, that it supports object as well. TypeScript does supports object paradigm as well, and that is where we will leverage to our use. But that also means in that objects we can use the specifier. We don't have to use where we are using as a script, executable script, but if we wanted to use an object, in that object we will use it. Maybe today I'll able to show you, if we have spare time, I'll try to show you that. You got the gist. I'm not expecting you to get everything like right away, but just to understand, TypeScript supports both functional and object oriented paradigm. Access specifier plays the role in object oriented paradigm and not in the functional paradigm. Okay, cool. So we talked about basic type. I'll show you the interface that is already there in the script. So I'll go to our code, and when we install this project yesterday, you would have seen that what is this? This is a constant, and this is not gonna change. So we talked about constant, and this is an array. This is an array of a string. So if I take this and I'll paste it in the Codegen. This is array of a string, right? And we have given the string as well. So we are declaring array of a type to do, and with the type of a string array. So I'm just trying to make you understand this as a code. So obviously this could be done as this as well. So there are multiple ways, and then you don't have to write as constant. Okay, no, it's not that. We already declared constant. Even if you don't write this, it's a string array. So you have to write string array, and you don't even if you don't write this will work as it is, because you have declared this in constant. And even this, like, so TypeScript trying to figure it out at the runtime, what is the type given you. If you don't given any type, it will try to add type as by looking at the object. But then there are some things which is not very easy to find out. For that, use types. If you go to the TypeScript documentation, not documentation, but then you will be able to see there is type called any. So there is this handbook, and then there is also an unknown type that you don't know. so so there are these other types as well, any, unknown. We won't go into this detail because 95% of the time you not gonna need it right away, and even in most of our session we not gonna focus on using those. And anyway, using any and unknown is not tends to be like very good practice anyway. So but they don't wanted to have like restrictions as such, so that is why those types are given in the TypeScript. Okay, bit of um, bit of misdirection there. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about an interface. So suppose there is something. Okay, let's go to the test that we developed. The first. Okay, so this is the test, and in this test, we have, like, if you see, we have username and password as an password that we need to pass. And if you go to the page, they have given us multiple user. So if we type something else which we tried in the last way, you will see that this will fail, right? And so in any test we need to pass like users data as an object. So what we can do, we can define those object using an interface kind of a thing, right? So let me write it down here. Interface user creates. I'm not using like following like very good guidelines about naming convention, but we will try to do that once we go forward, right? We will use like username, uh, which is of a type string, and password is of a type string, right? So once that is done, it's like most of the thing taken care of. What I mean by that, so this is what very similar thing that we can also see कि उन्होंने कैसे किया है. तो excuse me, let me have a sip of water. Okay, so sorry for that. Yeah, so we have this username, password, and suppose you wanted to initialize this, right? You say this constant valid user, and user creates of a type user create. So let's me like properly, so that type would be there, user credentials. So now the type, just like we discussed the type earlier here, correct? That this is the type and how different types work and those things. So now with interface we are able to define our own custom type, just like Java classes. But in Java classes we do like an implementation. Here we just talk about the attribute using TypeScript. Okay, I need credential which would have this username, password as a required field. There are other ways to make a mandatory, not non-mandatory field, like adding like question mark over here, but that's not we gonna look into it today. As I said, right, as you dig in more, you will need to learn more feature of TypeScript, and you will do it without like much of an overhead. So username, and then you will have to write it here, username, student, password 123, and then here you can just use valid user username, valid user password, right? So what are we looking at? We are looking at interface. We also looked at string. I'm just taking a note so that it would be easier for us when we try to brush up things in the next session if we do that. So where is my ID? So okay, in ID only. And now if I run this, it should work as it is, right? Just like last time it did work. It shouldn't have any. Okay, page to have URL in 1 second. Okay, it looks like, what is the error that we are getting? expecting to have with a timeout. So we have like timeout error. So let me go and change the timeout to, like, instead of 1 second, let me have it to the 10 second. I'm expecting this page to be displayed in 1 second, right, to have the URL, and that may not work, like, if for multiple reasons. This is strange. Is the site down? Yeah, it is down. It's taking more time, and that is why it's giving an error. Okay, we will try with something. Uh, okay, we don't need this. Mhm. We are not able to load this page where we're actually doing the login. So let me try one more thing whether it is possible. It is possible. So let me do one more step. Let me add one more step so that we need to click on this. So I'll just use like pick a locator. We are getting this. Okay. So I'm just modifying my test. So I'm now navigating to the page and then clicking on this page. I have this locator with me, and then I'll just click on it, and I'm hoping that once with this we will be able to do the it's okay. We don't need this. Expect to my timeout क्यों चाहिए? Wasn't there any need anyway? There is one more issue. Any one of you have identified one more issue with the code that is there? Why it is not working? Anyone? There is subtle hit in the IDE. You see this 3 dot? Await has no effect on this type of expression. So we have identified this particular button, but we have not clicked on it, right? Just like that, we have identified these locators, but in identified, after identifying it, we were filling the data. So here we have to perform a click operation, right? And I do that, and you see the subtle hint about this await which was there. It has gone now. So now I'll try to run and see whether it would work. Yeah, it is working, and URL is actually different, so that is why it is failing now. After login, the URL should be, yeah, as you can see in the assertion, right, it is logged in successfully. The URL should be logged in successfully and not this. So that is why test was failing, and now the test would work. Now we are talking about interface. Test has passed now. So why it is important? Suppose you have like you need to write 100 different test cases and wanted to use the same user's credentials. What you will do? You will just have to change the title. It don't allow me to have test with like same name. Now it should. So you can see the case 1, case 2, case 3. Case 1 we executed first. So you don't have to change these things. You define it to one constant, and then with the interface you can pass it off, right? And with interface you get the type sense as well. Like you enter and you get, okay, on this interface we have defined this field. Like even if you wanted to provide some detail, let's say age, and then age is 18, but age, it won't work. Why? Because credentials don't have age as an attribute. So you need to go to the credentials, you need to mention age. Age is actually like not mandatory, and it's a number, and then you will say it's an 18. Okay, and then it would work. And now it's up to you. Instead of username, you are trying to use age. It will work, but it is expecting a string, right? Because fill is like a method which expect a string. If you hover over here, you will see the first parameter it will expect as a string, and that is why it was giving me an error. So that's about using a type. So far all good. Any questions? Okay, cool. So right now what we will try to do, we will try to convert, so we write a positive test. Let's write, let me, okay, uh, let's create one more valid की जगह पे invalid कर देते हैं, invalid user, and instead of 3 I'll use 4 and it will fail, right? Positive login test, negative login test, but instead of valid user I'll do the invalid user, and now this URL was should be like something that we have seen earlier. So this should be this same URL, right? That, okay, it shouldn't be that URL, but it should be this URL. Now one more thing, so here you will also have a way to use regular expression instead of having complete URLs as well. Because why it is important, you might have like 3 different environments, and this URL, the base URL, would change for each environment. In this case, how would you write your kind of an exception? So it allows you to have regular expression or partial string to verify that you need to do. So we wrote like proper test. So I'll just comment out this test and I'll say run this test suite, and then the test will execute, right? Because I'm running locally, it is running with one worker and in sequential mode, but when you run in a CI/CD, it will work within parallel workers. And how do you configure worker? So if we talk to with Java background, worker are nothing but a threads, how many threads you are using to execute the test. So you can see now both of our test work properly, right? And if you change the URL like bit, both of these tests will fail and you will be able to see those. We are talking about interface, but I don't want to talk about interface in the isolation. I wanted to show where are the instances where you will use the interfaces and how it would work, right? So that is why I'm showing you all this. I hope it does make sound. Okay, this is still okay. Now it will reflect on the new test cases which are failed, and you will see like we have added one here, so that is why it is failing, and it will give us an error. And if we go back here also, it will give one because हमने दोनों test cases में one add करा था. Okay, so you got the gist interface, how Y interface is created. So if you want to pass the data between one method to another method, and it should be properly typed, so it would be easier to maintain and pass. So if you can provide obviously this in the direct test, but think about this, you have like 1000 test cases and writing this down, and if something is changed, there is a password expiration policy. After every 19 then password would expire. You have to go or use ID's function upon replacing text throughout all the code. But wouldn't it been easier if you define at the one place and just change it there and everything is taken care of? So these are like kind of an instances where knowing programming language good will work. Will it work without it? Yes. But will it work elegantly without much of an effort? No. So that's about interface. Now we will talk about last thing, await. What is await and why it is important. We will spend like last 10 minutes on that. I already created a demo for this in the TypeScript Playground, and it would be easier for you to understand this, right? So all the steps that you might have seen so far, right from the last sessions today, you will see that every test has this await and async written over it. What is await and async, right? As I said, so whole these things we talked about Node.js, how Node.js came into existence, how JavaScript runtime works. So JavaScript was initially developed only for the browsers and not for the executing it on own. Someone Rand Affel, he took away the JavaScript engine from V8 engine from Chromium and made a Node.js so that JavaScript can work as a standalone thing, and Node.js came into the picture. Why this is important to understand? Because JavaScript was never meant for a synchronous programming. तो now synchronous programming and asynchronous programming क्या होता है, right? So I'll give an example. So suppose you go to a temple and you stand in the queue because you wanted to be in front of a god, take a darshan of god, and then you will come back, right? So all the time you would have to be in a queue to see the god. So that's like a synchronous programming. You have to be in the queue to get that task done. Now you go to the hotel or restaurant and you order something and food, and waiter will come to you, he will get your order and he will go. Meantime you can check your phone, you can call someone, you can read a book, right? So you are not waiting on an order, though you have passed the order, right? And whenever the food is ready, waiter will come back with the food that you ordered and he will serve you the food, right? It is an asynchronous programming. So basically in asynchronous programming we delegate the task and then we start doing the other task. We don't have to wait till like that other task is completed. And then what happens if that task is completed, whoever we have delegated that to task, they will come back to us calling it out, the task is completed, right? That is an asynchronous programming, and that is what JavaScript was used, but it has some flaws. It's very hard to understand where we supposed to use what and those things, and especially in the automation it's never gonna happen that हमने यूजर नेम एक फील्ड में भरने को बोला है, पासवर्ड वी आर फिलिंग यूजर नेम इन वन फील्ड, पासवर्ड इन अनदर फील्ड, and then we are clicking on submit first. No, we need to make sure that we use the sequence in the same way. So we wanted to make everything in synchronous way, and that is where to make it in synchronous way we use await and async. So await is like telling the TypeScript or JavaScript wait till this particular action is completed, right? So if you don't write this await wala thing, then your script may not work as you expected. Especially no, not this. Okay, I'll show you this as well, and we will try it out. Even I don't know for which one it would, but it won't work. It might be, it might not, but most likely it will give an error because you are not waiting for any action, right? So I'm just running this particular test. And you see that it has not filled anything, any detail, and it just went on and it failed, right? So let me show the, I close the browser, I'll just bring it up so that you will be able to see it again. So it clicked on the submit first, it has not waited for putting the username and yeah, right? So because we have not waited for filling these things, it has not waited. Now let's add a wait. Okay, a bit to these things, and you will see the bit open difference. I'll just close this browser and reopen it. See, it worked this time, right? If I take away this await, it may not work. I supposed to close this browsers, and now if I add the await, it works. So basically, when you add a await, you tell ki you need to stand in a queue. You can't just go ahead and do the other things. So JavaScript, TypeScript was initially designed to work. It was meant to work in an asynchronous way, because browser has only one thread, and one thread everything supposed to be executed. Suppose you are reading something, so JavaScript will delegate that to something else, and while it was being read, if it is a file of let's say 1 MB, while it is being read and loaded into memory, it will go and do some other calculation. So that is why it was designed to be an asynchronous, but we want our things to be synchronous, and that is where we use await wala thing, right? So you have an already good example that you saw, and you can potentially try it out, but I wrote one thing in the morning for the session. So this would be the last thing that we will be covering today, and then we will take a break for the session, maybe for the next session. So delay is a function which returns a promise. Promise is nothing but like something you will promising that once this is done, I'll get back to you, right? So we talked about that waiter will get back to us. The waiter is making a promise on our order. Once your order is ready, I'll give it to back. So promise needs to be resolved. So that's something that you will have to look up. But for now, just think about this function. It will wait for a time that you will specify here in milliseconds. Okay, as JavaScript is asynchronous, if you don't write and promise, it won't even wait for this, and you will see the example over here. So these are two methods. Here I calling those with an await, and I am not calling with an await. So this call happens parallelly. It doesn't wait even 1 second. 1 second is too low to show you, but let me show you like 2 seconds. Okay, 3 seconds, and then probably try the same thing over here as well. 3 seconds and 3 seconds. Okay, and now I'll try to clear this out. Okay, why it is not executing? Executed time. You see, the parallel execution took 3 seconds and sequential took 6 seconds. Sequential total time is 6 seconds and parallel is 3 seconds. So what we did, where here we are saying in parallel, execute this method, wait for 3 seconds, execute this method, wait for 3 seconds, but we have not added await. So we are not actually waiting. हमने बोला कि you have to wait for 3 seconds. It is waiting for 3 seconds in the thread, but it is also waiting right away for this. So both the waiting starts at the exactly same time. This line number 25 is not waiting to execute completely 24 because await is not added. So that is why parallel calls, they are taking like 3 seconds only, like 1 millisecond it is taking more. But that's not the case with the sequential calls that we are doing, right? Here we are asking, okay, wait for 3 seconds, and it is actually waiting because we have added await. And then once that action is completed, we are asking, okay, wait for 3 seconds more. So totally it is waiting for 6 seconds. So like this is like very simple example to understand this things. So you can get a gist like what is await, what is promise, what is async. So every function that is wrote as an async, it's better you use an await to call it. Otherwise code might work, but it won't guarantee, because as I said, because of the way that it's supposed to work. Okay, so any questions in these examples, how these things work? I know we're supposed to cover the page object as well, but I think we are near the time, and it would be great if we just call it out. I'm also not doing that good today. Any questions? Okay then, that's potentially it. I don't have anything else. We have covered like what we discussed. The most important thing that you need to know, that you have to try it out, you need to practice it out. Otherwise, having these sessions, attending these sessions won't help much, because it will just it will give you some knowledge that others might not have. But once you try those things, like at least this interface thing, running this test locally, how this IDE works, trying out this module, Codegen, exploring this will give you a lot of confidence and good foundation. And as I said, like bare minimum TypeScript we have given. We will talk about, like, I know when people say that they know the Selenium, they just talk about the Selenium API, and I have not even started talking about the Playwright API because it is very obvious. But we will start talking about the locator strategy, how Playwright works, the different APIs, like fill is like an API to fill the things, like to get what we need, click, double click, then there is text content, then there are like lot of methods just like what we have in Selenium. But to be honest, these are like 10 methods. If you know like 90% of your work's getting done, you don't have to like invent something or find out something, because that is what your interaction would look like on the page as well, which is nothing but clicking navigating, filling form, and that's pretty much it. It might be an sometimes radio button, checkbox, some accordion, but that's it. Clicking, expanding, getting the text, entering the text, and moving ahead. Okay then, that's pretty much from my side. If you don't have any questions, we can call it off.